Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of the Road to 2000 series. Now, the time control is 3 plus 2, and in the last video, I analyzed 13 of the previous games that I had played. My rating went from 1921 to 1925, and this is the next games that I played after that. So, in this episode, I'll be analyzing 9 of the games that I had played from then. So, we'll start off with the first game that I had played. So, my rating went to 1926. Yeah, so I had gained 5 rating points essentially. So, in this game, my opponent started with d4, I played d5, bishop c, bishop f4, so this is the London system. This is what I typically play. My setup is knight f6, bishop f5, and then c5, if I can draw arrows correctly, knight c6. So typically that's what I play. Sometimes with e6 and bishop d7 if I can't play a timely bishop f5. So in this position, my opponent decided to go for c4, which is a very strange move because as you can see from the Masters database, it's not typically played, and the highest rated games here, I don't think there's any Grandmaster game here. So in this position, the computer recommended move is actually d takes c4, and then it proceeds like this. I defend my pawn, and this kind of looks like a position that you would get from a Slav defense, where you gain a pawn, but you have to compromise your position a bit to try and defend it. So it's only minus zero point 0.1 in this position, and with that I decided to just defend my pawn with e6. That way I don't get any complications, especially in a 3 plus 2 game, right? So it's normal moves. I play c5, which is my intended plan. My opponent plays e6, liberating their bishop. Now I develop my last. Well, I develop my knight. The last pieces are the bishop, these two bishops, and then after takes, I take with the knight, and that's not a particularly good move. The computer doesn't like it because when the knight takes, it takes with tempo. Typically, in these positions, after takes, if you take with the knight, the opponent can play e4, dislodging the knight. But here, because the knight attacks the bishop, that is no longer a possibility. So my opponent decides to ignore me and simply develop their knight, and I seize the opportunity to just get the bishop pair. And not only that, I also gain a pawn because this pawn is defended twice and attacked twice. So my opponent can take this pawn, attacking the knight. They attack my pawn, but then here I just follow it up with a check. The recommended move is actually for the knight to go back, but here I would probably just kick away the knight. They can go back to c3, so they would have to go to, let's say, a3, and then now the pawns are doubled, so I have a huge advantage. But unfortunately for my opponent, when I went to check, they decided to defend with the queen, and this is a big blunder because now I can block with, I can develop my bishop with tempo, and this bishop attacks their queen. I guess it's not game over because they could bring back the knight, but my opponent resigned here. So this is how the game would go. They would have to bring back their knight, attacking the queen, and then this is a very tricky situation because the queen is attacked. If wherever it moves, it's another check with tempo on the rook. So that was the first game. It was relatively straightforward, and let's go to the next game. Alright, so the second game was Queen's Gambit declined, so d4, d5. So this is the normal Queen's Gambit declined, and here my opponent plays knight f3. Now you could go for like the Queen's Indian defense here, since knight f3 comes before bishop g5, but I decided to go for a normal Queen's Gambit declined with bishop e7. Now my opponent plays bishop f4, which is the Blackburn. Stockfish also calls it the Horowitz attack. But so in this position, typically you have ideas like c4, castles. So one idea is to castle your king, just castle. But here, white has this idea with knight b4, which isn't a good idea in this position because according to the computer, I could take, and if the knight comes here attacking my rook, I have this check with the bishop, and if the bishop goes back, okay, then they just lose the knight. If they block with the knight, I have this move knight e4, which is crazy. Basically winning on the spot because if they take, what's the follow up here? If takes, I have queen takes. If the bishop comes, so basically I am going to have a very strong attack on my opponent, and this knight isn't escaping. But that's not what happened in the game because I don't want any complications. I go for a6. And what this does is it just prevents bishop b5 altogether, knight b5 rather. So my opponent proceeds to take space in the center, and typically I struggle in these positions because I never know what to do, but I decide to go. Here the computer wants me to go knight c6 just to develop my knight, but in Queen's Gambit declines positions, I prefer to, so this is the main line of the engine. This just feels a little bit cramped for me. So in Queen's Gambit positions, I prefer to just try to relieve the pressure. So I go b6. This is a typical idea in this position. Sorry, I castle first, then go b6. Okay. So my opponent defends the pawn, and the idea of b6 is I want to take, and then take, winning a pawn. So my opponent defends the pawn. I do not want to take because again we have the same situation where my opponent has a bunch of pawns cramping down my position. So here I play a5. Again, similar ideas. I want to take after takes, and again my opponent defends their pawn. So it's kind of a tricky situation where I don't really know what I should do here. Now the computer wants me to play knight e4 and let white advance in the position. I keep pressing the wrong button. Apologies. So the computer wants me to go for knight e4 here. If takes, this isn't really a big deal, but that just doesn't seem okay for me. I want to relieve the pressure as much as possible. So I didn't know what to do, and I ended up playing bishop d7. Now this move the computer doesn't like because my position is still cramped. There's not really a good plan of how to develop this knight because at some point it might be chased away with b4, b5 rather. So my opponent um, develops their bishop. I decide to take so that I can exchange on this diagonal, and I'm like, you know what? Let me develop my last piece here. And after takes, which the computer doesn't like this move because when I take back, all of a sudden I have some sort of initiative where I have some attacks on the white position. But in this position, so instead of taking, my opponent would have been better off just sidestepping. Okay, now back to the original position. After takes, queen takes, my opponent proceeds to kick away my knight, but like I said, my knight just comes in attacking his bishop. Okay, so my opponent goes c6, and here I decide to take, takes, and bring my bishop back. However, apparently, the best move in this position was to just come in with my queen because I have crazy ideas of checking here, right? If my opponent takes, I can just take with check. Blocking is kind of difficult because I'm also attacking the bishop. So I get to win a piece here, right? Same story if they block with the knight, I just win this bishop like this. And I have all sorts of ideas there. But I didn't see that and I decided to just take because I was afraid that I might lose my knight. Plus keep in mind this is a blitz game, so I'm trying to play as quickly as possible. So takes, and here I bring my bishop back, which apparently is a terrible move. Even taking here is much better because, wait, taking here with the idea of check, I guess. What's the idea here? The idea is 94. Yeah, this gets really complicated. If takes, my opponent loses a piece here because if they take, I have this check here and I'm threatening to win the rook. If the king goes up, it's bye-bye to the rook. But I decide to just preserve my bishop. So my opponent wins the pawn, and apparently this isn't that great for my opponent, even though they have a pawn up and these pawns are close to promotion. Because again, I can play knight e4, and if takes, it's the same idea, right? If takes, I have to check there. So knight e4 apparently was the move that liberates my position, but I decided to develop my bishop because I thought it was cramped and I'm pinning the knight. My opponent castles, and here my position is just much worse because their position is liberated. They have pawn up, these pawns are close to promotion, and my bishop doesn't really have anywhere to go because it's being blocked here. Okay, so I decide to bring in my queen, putting more pressure on the knight. The knight moves back, and here I bring in my knight because since the knight is no longer here, this square is kind of free. Now here I'm in desperation mode. I'm trying to create some sort of place for my bishop to reside, which is what happens. But this entire time I knew that my position was much worse and I thought I was actually going to lose the game. I attack the bishop, opponent retreats their bishop. I decide to create some lift for my king in case one of these pieces ends up coming here. I don't want any ideas of back rank mate. And also bringing the king here might be a bit loose. I want to be able to move this bishop freely. So this is what happens in the game. They attack my bishop, I move it out of the way, and my opponent goes in like this. Now, here apparently I have options of going knight c3, and if rook e1 is played, let's see, they can't come here because if the rook goes there, it's check, forking the king and the rook. So after after knight c6, they have to play rook e1, and then let's see, rook e1. I could even go for the trade. Okay, this is interesting, but I think even though the computer is like, okay, I guess since I get to win the pawn back, that's okay. But in a blitz game where you have to, to go for this, I have to see that entire variation. So in this position, I decide to just quickly, let's go back to the original position, develop my bishop to d6 because it feels passive here. I can't bring it anywhere else along the diagonal, so here I just trade the bishops, even though I'm down the piece. Now in this position, this move was bad by my opponent because they give up the pawn, and this was the strongest piece in their position, right? So I'm down the exchange, but I'm still trying to hold on here. In this position, apparently, I can take, because if takes, I have this move, bishop g6. I'm attacking the knight, and if the knight moves, I get to win the rook. But not seeing that in the distance, and since I'm losing, I didn't want to trade, so I decided to just bring my knight back. Okay, and here, my opponent comes in with their knights. I try to bring my queen into the position to attack some pieces here. My opponent defends, and I have 9 seconds left on the clock. My opponent has 4 seconds left. Now at this point the accuracy is going to go down a lot. So this check, that was a bad move because it doesn't do anything. I don't even get to win the rook, right? But panicking because I don't have any time, I decide to bring my queen back. The queen comes in attacking my rook, but it's defended by the knights. I bring my queen in trying to attack the rook in case this knight moves. The rook moves out of the way. I move my knight, but this blunders because this rook is hanging now. After takes, my opponent gets to win my rook. I bring my king up, and now it's just full on attack. I'm trying desperately to create something, create some open files, but at this point I already know that I'm losing. My opponent attacks that pawn, but they give up this knight. So I take the knight. They decide to take the pawn, but unfortunately the rook is hanging. So somehow my opponent ends up blundering a completely winning position, but there's still hope because this pawn is 2 squares away from queening. After the check, I defend with the bishop, and my opponent simply resigned in this position. So this was a crazy game where I was pretty much on the back foot the entire time. My position was cramped, but because of some blunders that my opponent made, and also my position wasn't completely losing because I had chances of creating something with the pawn here. So I guess in a blitz game anything can happen. So this was the second game. So let's go into the third game. Right, so the third game was a bird opening where my opponent played 1f4. Now in these types of openings, as you can see, it gives black an advantage because white isn't taking control of the center. Like white isn't following the classical chess principles and taking control of the center. So that being said, I decided to just take the center. My opponent plays e3. Now I should say that I've never studied these openings. Typically sidelines like this, I just play based on classical chess principles. Again, I take control of the center. My opponent play. I don't even know what the purpose of that move is. I get to develop my knight. As you can see, there is nothing in the master's database here, but apparently this transposes into something that other people have played. So my opponent finally decides to play d4, but I can just take, and after takes, I develop my bishop. So the disadvantage of these sidelines is typically developing this bishop is challenging for black because white could, let's say, bring in their queen, but here I can easily defend this pawn with queen d7. So I sort of get a free hand in the opening, and white relinquishes their strong initiative. So my opponent develops their bishop, I take their take, I develop my knight, and here it's relatively straightforward. I'm just trying to develop my pieces. However, these positions can be tricky um, where black has this sort of pawn structure and white has f4, and because there can be ideas of attacking here, and if all your pieces are stuck here, sometimes the game can change very quickly. Yeah, so some openings that follow that patterns are like the Coley system, where if you're not careful with black, you realize that you're losing somehow after a few moves. But here I decide to castle, just play normal moves, and this I think is where I started to go wrong. I played a6 here because as a Sicilian player, I really love playing b5 and b4, but here it's not necessary because I can simply bring my rook into the game. There's no need for this move. It just wastes time. Alright. But I figured since white is going to attack me on the king side, I thought the proper plan is to try and attack on the queen side. So here I played a6. My opponent brings their knight in. I bring my rook in. And here I make a big mistake by playing b5 because I relinquish control of this square, right? Because here white can come into the game. Now they have two knights in my position. This knight is also attacking that pawn. I cannot defend that pawn because if I try to, there's this, and if takes, the knight forks my queen and my rook. So that move was a terrible move by me. Um, However, my opponent doesn't do that, and here I get to take the I get to we simply trade knights. They bring their knight into the game. The knight is again attacking the pawn, which is defended by the rook. The computer wants me to just play queen b6 and go proceed with the game, but I decide to trade because I thought I might end up winning this rook at this pawn at some point. I bring my knight in, attacking the pawn, two attackers, they defend, and here I play a5, and the computer really doesn't like this move because, let's see, oh yeah, because it hangs the pawn on b5. So I didn't even realize that when I was playing the game, right? And I can't take back here because my rook would be hanging. But my opponent doesn't see that. Again, they still don't see that. They bring in their rook so they can attack me. At the moment they can't because my knight defends that square. But basically here my position is lost. I decide to bring my other rook into the game, into the open file. My opponent brings the other rook here to sort of attack me on the king side. That's the idea. And here I take. Now my opponent makes a big mistake by taking with the a pawn because now I have this open file for my rook, right? If my opponent takes with the other pawn, the c pawn, this rook is basically out of the game. I don't even know what my plan would be here. But by taking with this pawn, I sort of have some glimmer of hope, and all of a sudden I'm the one who's attacking white. So white decides to prevent the attack, but there is an awesome tactic here with knight d2 because now the queens have to be traded, and once the queens are traded, there is a fork on the rooks. So all of a sudden there's some hope. However, I'm now realizing that my opponent could take, and I think I realized this during the game as well. Oh no no no! My opponent doesn't have to take. My opponent could take here because after check, Takes. I guess the argument is I have to bring my rook back. I wonder what this does. This check. Okay, so this check, yeah, white simply blocks. It achieves nothing. If I check with this, same idea. And with the, even though I'm up an exchange here, these pawns are very strong, right? Because white has basically has two pass pawns here. They're just going to push the pawns and try to promote and come up with a new queen. But luckily, my opponent wasn't thinking about that at all, and they decide to simply pin my knight to my rook. But this is a terrible blunder because they forget that the queen is hanging. And in this position, my opponent resigned. So this was a quick game. So after, you could see that before the game, my rating was 1944. So I sort of got 3 wins. The first game was a convincing game, but then the next 2 games, I sort of got lucky, as you can see. But this was the third game, so let's go straight into the fourth game. Right, starting this fourth game, I had gone all the way to 1952, so I was really proud of myself here, getting closer to my all-time highest rating in Blitz. So, but anyways, this game goes on with e4, e5, knight f3. So this is the fid or defense. And if you've watched the previous episode, the setup that I like is simply this, especially in Blitz, because you just get a crazy attack on the king side there. I like to castle queen side in this position, but my opponent plays a strange move here in knight e2. This is a very strange knight e7 rather. This is a very strange move because like this knight isn't really doing much here. You want to develop your knight to the most active square, but anyways, I ignore that and just proceed with my normal plan. Like I said, so we're both trying to develop pieces, and here my opponent plays this move f5. Now f5, with f5 I ended up playing f3 so that after takes I can take, but the computer actually wants me to play bishop c4, which I would have played if I had seen it. But typically this is such a strange position because typically you don't normally get the chance to develop this bishop with tempo like this, because in this line I basically have like a I have more piece development than my opponent, because my opponent still needs to develop their knight, they still need to develop their bishop. They don't really have very active squares. The bishop can't go here because of this bishop. If the knight goes here, they'll have to wait another move until they can develop their bishop, and even then the bishop has to be protected by one of the rooks first. So it's a very tricky situation where black would be cramped, which is why my advantage is plus 4.1. But anyways, I decided to play my normal setup and just play f3 because this is a blitz game. I don't want to take too much time. So this move was really bad by my opponent. I ended up going back, and then this move was even worse because it doesn't accomplish anything. I guess they were trying to trick me because after takes, I cannot take back because of this move, bishop g5, which pins my queen to the king. But I'm not going to fall for that, so I just bring my bishop back. White develops their bishop. I move my king out because typically you want your king here so they can defend the pawns there. They develop their knight, and here, realizing that this pawn is weak, I decide to play knight b5. The computer wants me to come here, I guess, or to simply develop my other bishop, or to come in with the knight. But I thought this was straightforward because I'm going to win this pawn no matter what. So my opponent decides to develop their knight because by attacking my pawn. So this knight and the bishop, they're both attacking the pawn, but this isn't really a big deal because I can just bring I can just push the pawn up, and even if my opponent comes in with check, I move my king and nothing is going on there. My opponent decides to bring their knight in for some reason, and here I simply take. And when the knight comes in, this is a tricky move because the queen also attacks my knight, right? And the next move is going to bring the rook in to pin my queen. And here I just bring my knight back. It also attacks the the queen, and also blocks the connection between the bishop and the knight. So bring my knight back. He checks me. which is weird because I just win the knight. He moves his king, his queen, and here the plan is simple. I'll just try to trade pieces because I'm up material. So, and by the way, if he cannot take the knight because I take back with the queen, if the bishop takes, I take back with the knight. This move was kind of clever, but I just check, and after the queen takes back, I block with my queen, and then I want another trade. We trade pieces, and I'm basically up a piece here. So I take the pawn. I take the pawn. I attack his bishop. I bring my bishop back. I bring the rook in. And I guess in this position I should have tried to bring my other rook in as quickly as possible, because what ended up happening is my opponent got this opportunity to double up on the on the on the on the a file, right? So after check, my rook is basically lost. The computer doesn't mind this actually. It wants me to just go and play c4, and after check takes, because I have these two pawns here and my king is very active. These pieces are also very active. I'm still winning, but I did not see that, and actually in this position, what happened? c4, king b3. Actually, in this position, I lost on time. Yeah, I had 17 seconds left, and I lost on time. So I couldn't figure out what to do because after I thought after the check I'm losing my rook and I'm losing my advantage, but apparently it's not a big deal. So anyways, that was a terrible loss. So let's go over to the fifth game, I believe. Now, in the fifth game, I played against the very same opponent, so it was another bird opening. Of course, we played 3 games, I believe, with this guy. Yeah, it was another bird. I won the first game, so it was one of those where I won the first game. They sent me a rematch. They won the next game, and then they won the next game as well. But they didn't accept the rematch because it was now 2-1, and some people only accept rematches when they are down a game, but then when they're up a game, they don't, which is very strange. But anyways, this is another bird opening. This time with b3, and then similar ideas here. Um, now, now in this game, as you can see from the evaluation bar, black has a relatively large advantage, and my plan here was very simple. Castles, the queen goes up, so I push the pawns on the queen side because I sort of had an idea that my opponent wanted to castle queen side, which is what they did. So I pushed the pawns. This position is relatively straightforward. In this position, I saw that I could sack the bishop for takes, and then I'm going to promote to a queen next. The bishop blocks, so I play c4 so that I can bring my bishop here. I didn't see that move in the previous move, but this is mate in 2, so I go check. And for some reason, I didn't see that if I promote here to a queen, this is checkmate. They can't take the queen because my bishop actually uh, pins their bishop. So somehow, I do not know how this even happened, because I was looking at this game, and when I saw that it was mate in 1 and I didn't play it, I was pretty pissed. But anyways, takes, I promote to a queen, takes, and here my plan is to try and bring my queen into the attack. So they take. I, I felt like I was still better off in this position. I just have to be careful not to lose pieces like my knight here. I push the pawn, I take, the queen takes, and here I lose my advantage by playing knight d7. But my plan was pretty simple. I just want to bring my rook here and pin. And my opponent likely didn't see that because they ended up just taking. And after takes, I'm winning again. So takes. So now I just try to chase their king, bring my knight into the attack, bring my king closer. And here, in hindsight, maybe I should have played c4. Sorry, e5. because now I lose the pawn there, and it's tricky. So in this position, I'm just trying to attack, see if I can get some forks, but white has a lot of pieces as well, so this isn't as easy as it looks, especially since I'm running on 9 seconds the entire game. I had spent most of my time trying to figure out how to checkmate my opponent in the opening because it was quite complicated. And here, my opponent starts attacking me back. So checks, checks, and here we trade, and it's, yeah, basically, I just have to find the right configuration to like get a fork and then get a mate. But because of how low I was on time throughout, and it's kind of funny because I actually had an opportunity for a checkmate and won. So I think my mind just wasn't in it on this particular game because okay, let's see, I missed that mate and I missed another mate somewhere here because this is checkmate. But somehow I didn't see that because of how low I was on the clock. Again, checks. I'm trying to figure out the best way. I'm trying to win the rook somehow, but I'm pretty much playing right away, right? And this is tricky because after check, he can actually win my queen. I saw that, so I kept checking him. And here I actually lost on time, believe it or not. I did not realize that I only had 2 seconds. And then, when you're into the game and then you just hear the sound of game over, your time is out. So this was a pretty disappointing game. I'm especially disappointed that I didn't see this checkmate because this is rudimentary. So I guess this is a sign that I should also start working on my tactics. But anyways, let's move over to the sixth game. Today I'm going to do 9 games, by the way. So this is the sixth game. Right, so this game was a relatively straightforward open Sicilian. So e4, c5, knight f3, knight c6. I play the open lines, so I play d4, my opponent takes, I take. And in the previous game, I believe I had played. Oh no, it was different because in the previous episode, my opponent had played e6 early on, which leads to the Taimanov, but here there's no e6. This pawn is attacked, so it's natural for me to defend with knight c3. Okay, so the most commonly played move here is e5, which leads to, I believe this is the Scheveningen. Yeah, I think this is the Scheveningen. You get bishop g5, a6. Yeah, it leads to the Scheveningen. When both knights are out, it's called the Scheveningen. When one of the knights is still in the game, it's called when one of the knights is not developed, I think it's called the Kalashnikov. So anyways, that's the Sicilian for you. By the way, the reason why I know a lot of variations in the Sicilian is because when I first started playing it, I picked up this book called Starting Out the Sicilian. It's very there are a lot of starting out books out there, but starting out the Sicilian, in my opinion, is the best one because the moves are explained in a manner suitable for like somebody who's just picking up a new opening, a beginner. I find that most chess books, even the ones that are meant to target beginners, can be quite complicated, where they're written by grandmasters and they end up looking at so many different variations to the point that it becomes confusing. Starting out the Sicilian, on the other hand, focuses more on plans that both sides have in the position. So if you wanna start playing the Sicilian, I would definitely recommend that book. But anyways, Bishop e3. Here my opponent, I did not understand the idea of this move, and I knew that it's very odd in this position, so I didn't even care. The computer wants me to play Bishop e2 to target the pawn, in which case they have to defend it. But I really love to play Bishop e3, so that's what I went for. Okay, now my opponent develops their queen. I develop my queen as well, and here my bishop is attacked. Now in this position, the computer wants me to just play knight b3, attack the queen, and okay, what is he going to do? He has to retreat his queen, and I can retreat my bishop, but I decide to retreat my bishop first. Apparently, and this gives me an advantage because now I can play knight b3, attacking his queen again. But when you're facing this situation, especially in the blitz game, my first thought was, okay, this isn't really an issue because I can just take. But apparently, this is an issue because when I bring back my bishop, my opponent can lock my bishop in with h4. So I'm losing my bishop here. But I didn't see that. I wasn't even thinking about it. And luckily for me, neither was my opponent. So they bring in their bishop. I develop my bishop again. My opponent has a huge advantage because of the same move, which they do not play. So we end up, and honestly, I don't know what the point of this move was because my opponent just ended up losing a pawn there. So that was a bad move. I guess they thought they were trying to make me take with the queen, and then after I take, their queen takes my bishop. But I never had any intentions of castling queenside in this game, so I simply take with the pawn, and next move I castle. And after castles, now I have the advantage because I'm a pawn up after that d5 move. I'm a pawn up and I have the bishop pair. So here I just played safe. I drop my bishop back. This bishop attacks my rook. I put my rook on the open file. I put the other rook on the other open file. Yeah, so I'm just playing quickly and intuitive moves. Here I take because I figured that I'm safe. If my opponent tries to pin me, I'm not pinned here because the queen can always go back. Takes, takes. But then here I sort of panicked for a moment because if I move my queen out of the way, the rook takes, and then all of a sudden I'm in a worse position. But I realized that I could play f4, which defends everything. And once the rook moved, I take. My opponent takes like this, but they forgot about their queen on the other side, so they resign in this position. So this was a relatively quick and straightforward game. Alright, now let's go into the seventh game. The seventh game was actually a really, really crazy game because it was a knight off and a mainline knight off. So those positions tend to get really complicated. So I'm a knight off player, by the way. My opponent plays e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes. So this is typical theory. Knight c, knight c3, a6, and here I play e6, which is the main move. You don't play in bishop g5 positions. You don't play e5, and I believe it's because you get knight f5, and after takes, knight bd7. Yeah, you basically get this weakness on the diagonal because this bishop is unchallenged, so it's considered suboptimal. Now, when the opponent plays bishop g5, always play e6. And here there's queen b6, is known as the poison pawn variation. I've never played this before, ever. Even though I've been playing the knight for a very long time, I've never played the poison pawn variation. It goes queen d2 takes. Now it's known as the poison pawn because black wins the pawn, but white gets a really crazy initiative. And as you can see, the pawn structure here is just awful. I'm a pawn up, but this position is really ugly. And in blitz, generally speaking, in the initiative, in my view, it's better to have the initiative than to have an extra pawn if the position is going to be equal. So I go for the quiet alliance with simply bishop e2, defending the bishop. Now queen f3. Now these are all the main lines. Here there's queen c7 or knight bd7. In this position they transpose. So my opponent castles. I guess this is more suboptimal, but no, it's not suboptimal because it transposes to the same thing. Now g4, as you can see, this is all main line. b5, bishop takes, the bishop takes, knight takes, then you get g5, the knight goes back, and then f5. My opponent is trying to weaken my king side, as you can see. They're trying to soften up my pieces. And here I take the pawn, which was left, but that's actually the main line, and white has the advantage because of this strong attack with my position. By the way, in case you're wondering, white cannot play e5 here because since the queen is here, you get to play bishop b7, and the queen and the rook are on the same diagonal. So I've actually won a lot of games like this when I was like 15, 1600. This kind of position used to happen quite frequently. But at this level, people normally don't make these types of mistakes, especially uh, if they're playing the main line. It means they know what they're doing. So b5 takes. This is all theory. The knight comes in. As you can see, this is the top line of the computer. Knight b6, according to, but there's only been 3 games played with knight b6, so maybe. But according to table base, okay, there's only been 3 games. Okay, so this is kind of misleading because it shows one is a win, one was a draw. 33% for everyone, but it's only 3 games. But the main line, which is 95, has been played according to the Lichess database 352 times. So takes, let's see, this is the Masters database. See, even on the Lichess database, this is also commonly played, and on Lichess, the numbers are more what there's less of a gap, anyways. So the king moves 95. The queen has to move away because the knight attacks the queen, and this is where my knowledge of this line ends, right? So apparently here the best move is queen d8, and then this is the line that follows. It's a crazy line, but I wasn't familiar with it, and this was the end of my theory. And since my bishop is being attacked, I decided to go bishop f6, simply defending. And this doesn't seem to be a bad move because I believe, yeah, this is one of the options here as well. Let's see, in the Lichess database. Yeah, on Lichess people typically play bishop f6 also because it's just more intuitive. So I play this move, they take. Now, the reason why the queen goes here is because it pins my pawn, right? I cannot take here because that would be open check. So I have to take with my bishop. They take. And here, the recommended move is castles, according to the engine. Castles is the recommended move. Just castle. If they take, you take here or like this, and it's not a big deal. Okay. And if you can, white gave up the pawn initially, but now they have the pawn back, right? Because I cannot take. If I could take back like this, I would be up a pawn, I believe. Yeah, but now it's all equal pawns. And here, I saw this from a distance, and my plan was to play g6, which is what I played here. My opponent brings their knight, and I guess that's why you have to castle because white keeps coming in with the initiative. Now I have to defend the bishop because the knight attacks the bishop. It also attacks my queen. So I defend, they take, I take, and I was actually happy to see that because it kind of it relieves some of the tension because this knight was very strong here. So takes, I take back with the knights, and actually these moves aren't bad. Even though it says plus 0.8, the knight off tends to be complicated, and I guess that's one of the main reasons why at the highest level people don't play it frequently because black is the one who has to be creative. And with this main line with bishop g, when I was new, I used to play bishop e3, the English attack. But the main line with bishop g5 is extremely scary because black has to know all these moves. If you don't, you're pretty much screwed. Anyways, here I castle. They bring in their bishop, and I was disappointed to see this because my plan was to bring my bishop on c8. This seems like the best square for my bishop, but I can't anymore, so I go for rook a e8. And apparently this is the best move. And I knew that was better because I don't want to bring this bishop here because there's going to be all sorts of pieces coming in, right? White is going to bring their rook, and if I move, already you can see that there's less there are less defenders for the knight. Whereas if I bring the other rook in, when I bring the other rook in, This rook stays defending the knight. So anyways, my opponent brings in their rook. The best move apparently is to bring my queen in, but I decide to reserve the queens, put my queen on e7. My opponent wants to double up, and here I realize that my best bet was to trade queens. Because if I trade queens, it alleviates the pressure in my position. Also, this queen is pinning my knight, so my knight can't move. Here, my opponent insists on doubling, so I take, and after take, knight e5, and all of a sudden my position is liberated. So my opponent checks me. That doesn't really make a difference because I just bring my king up, and here we're going to have to make a bunch of trades. And I was happy to see this because honestly, the main line of a knight off can be quite a headache, to be honest. So I was happy to see this because in my mind I was like, okay, this is now just a draw. So I bring my king here, and and I thought this was a draw, but when my opponent played bishop c8, I realized that I was losing because I'm going to lose these pawns, right? This move that my opponent played b4, it seems like they're just trying to push their pawns because this is the end game. But actually, this is called a deep freeze because it freezes my pawn. I can't play a5 because if I play that, the pawn simply takes. And now I'm just going to lose the pawn. But I decided that it's better for me to it's better for me to let them take and try to stop the pawn than to not. But apparently that was the wrong the wrong option. So I bring my king in, I'm trying to prevent that pawn from promoting. And as you can see, it's not that straightforward. I bring my king in, and all of a sudden, white's advantage is gone. Because this bishop has to be stuck defending the pawn, right? Now I bring my knight in. I should also mention that I have 6 seconds left here, so I'm just playing whatever move I can at this point. This move is attacking this pawn, but they can easily defend. So again, it's tricky. My opponent has 37 seconds, I have 4 seconds. Again, I'm just playing quick moves, and this move is a mistake. Apparently, I should go knight h4 because this maintains some sort of contact with the pawns. Also, actually, I should play this move because now the king cannot get in. Yeah, actually, the king cannot get in, so it's basically either they push one of their pawns, in which case, what am I going to do? I'm just gonna move my king back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, because the king cannot get in. But I didn't see that during the game. If it was a rapid game, I might have seen it. But I went for a check, and as you can see, my position is hopeless here. I'm lost. But lucky for me, my opponent was played this in a clumsy manner because they allow me to win this pawn. So they take, I push the pawn. Here I realize that okay, my only hope is to try to promote as well. So they bring their king in. Now I can no longer push my pawn because the bishop defends, right? And the worst part is if I push and they take, my knight is also hanging, so I can't even take this pawn. Now I try to bring my knight closer to the action. I try to bring my knight closer to the action, and here there is a fork looming. But my opponent sees that and brings their king in. And all of a sudden, my opponent's advantage is gone. And I was happy to see this move because now I can check and take the bishop, right? So my opponent thought bringing their king in was the best option, but actually going the other way is the better option because by doing this, by bringing their king close, when they take, I get to take this pawn. And when the king moves out of the way, because I had pushed this pawn earlier, I get to push the pawn, they push the pawn, I promote, they promote, but I have this check. And this pawn cannot be stopped. These pawns, both of these pawns are going to promote, and here my opponent resigned. So this was a really crazy game. I really enjoy this dynamic night of positions, but they're also headache inducing to be honest. But anyways, the next game, so there's 2 games left. I played against the same guy. He was 2096. So they wanted to redeem themselves, sort of. So this is the next game. Now, the next game was actually a quick one because the next game was a quick game in the French. So e4, e6, d4, d5. And against the French, I play the Tarash variation. It's what I first learned, and also when I look at all the variations of the French, I feel like this is the most confusing one for black to face. So my opponent decides to take instead of leaving the tension in the position, and this gives me a slight advantage in the position. I take, they bring their knight in. Now here I'm supposed to play bishop d3. And because I hadn't faced this variation in a very long time, also I haven't been playing chess consistently, like I said, I ended up playing e3 first. I knew that this move can be played at some point during the game, but I should have started with bishop d3. Anyways, they develop their knights, and I know that in these positions you take, they take. I develop my other knights. After c5, I could. There's like knight e5, bishop e3. I could even play bishop d3. So if my bishop was already here, I think after playing e5, I would have played c3. So, but instead I played bishop g5, which I have never played in any French. But in this position, somehow I did that. And after this check, I blundered by playing queen d2. And just like I won against someone in one of the earlier games, my queen gets pinned to my king, and this is basically game over. So I tried to play for a few moves, but there is no hope for me, and I lose the game. Now let's go over to the last game. In the last game, I played again against the same opponent, and this was also an exciting game because we got to play the knight off again. Alright, so this was another exciting night off, and it went similar to the previous one. So this is all the same as two games go. Same line, main line, same moves. Yeah, same moves. Let me see where the deviation is. So in this game, okay, in this game my opponent played knight d5 early. Yeah. In this game, however, my opponent doesn't play knight d5 in this position. They decide to take with check. And I was actually happy to see this because I can just take. Essentially, I can give up this pawn, right? It's four pawns for me. Actually, they can't take this pawn right now because it's hanging. But I can give up the pawn. I don't mind. I would rather castle my king and try to attack their king. So now their queen is under attack. They retreat their queen. I castle. I give up the pawn. Like I said, I don't really care about the pawn they take because this gives me the initiative now. I play knight c5, knight c4, attacking the rook. Now the rook has to go back. And here I actually missed a crazy tactic because my idea of coming here is I want to check, and when they take, let's say white plays this move, I want to play check, and after takes, I have like I have takes. The structure on the king side is now ruined. I have all sorts of ideas of bringing my queen here and trying to go for mates. So that is what I was aiming for. What I didn't realize is that in this position I can actually take right away because after takes, b4 pins the knight to the king. So they can't move the knight. Next move, I'm going to take, say, a random move. I'm going to take with check. So, anyways, the game proceeds. I bring my rook into the position so that I can go for this idea. My opponent attacks my rook, which I was not happy to see. Again, this move is always annoying. And here, I would like to bring my rook here, put it on like a dark square. But I noticed that if I do this, this knight can jump into the position with tempo. Now the bishop is attacked, the rook is attacked, and suddenly I no longer have any tricks here. But lucky for me, there is a square that I can go to, and that square, funny enough, the computer just wants me to sack my rook to takes. Let's see. Oh, okay, it's not really sacking the rook because, well, it is because what if they take? Okay, it's not really sacking the rook because if takes, what do I do now? Okay, same idea. So I guess if I had seen that move was lurking in the position the entire time, but I decided to put my rook on c6. No more tricks with the knight coming to d5, and this should be an easy win. I was probably going to take this and try to put my rook on the same diagonal and go for mate. So yeah, this was the last game that I played, and from this day, my opponent's rating was 2092, so it was a nice way to finish because I beat the highest rated player that I played on the day. And in this night off, which is my main repertoire. So this day I went from 1926 to 1960, which is my current rating in this next episode. So reaching this far, this is the end of the video. I hope you learned something. So like I said, I'm making this video so that I can be more consistent with my chess, and also revising the videos allows me to go through the moves and uh, and learn any mistakes that I usually make, right? Because what happens in chess is, especially with Blitz, you play a game, you finish the game, and then tomorrow, if you made a mistake today, you make the same mistakes that you made today tomorrow. So this helps me analyze my games, and also, fortunately, it helps you guys to learn the variations and several openings as well. So I'm going to stop yapping now, and yeah, this is the end of the video, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Okay, so that's not bye. Now